Have you ever wondered if greatness can come from the most unexpected places? Can a shepherd boy become a mighty king? Can someone chosen by God still make mistakes, face heartbreak, and yet leave behind a legacy that changes history? The story of David is more than the story of a king. It is a story of faith, courage, failure, forgiveness, and God's amazing grace. It reminds us that God does not look at our appearance, our past, or our limitations. He looks at our hearts. This is the incredible story of David, from a humble shepherd boy to one of the greatest kings Israel would ever know. Long ago, in the small town of Bethlehem, there lived a young boy named David. He was the youngest of 8 sons born to a man named Jesse. While his older brothers trained as soldiers and dreamed of greatness, David spent his days tending his father's sheep. To many people, David was just an ordinary shepherd boy. He spent countless hours beneath the open skies watching over his flock. He protected them from danger and guided them to green pastures and quiet streams. Though his work seemed small and unnoticed, God was preparing David for something extraordinary. While caring for his sheep, David learned lessons that would shape his future. He learned courage when wild animals threatened his flock. He learned responsibility when no one was watching. Most importantly, he learned to trust God completely.
David loved to sing and worship God. Sitting upon the hillsides of Bethlehem beneath the stars,
Praise that would one day become some of the most beloved psalms ever written. The shepherd boy had no idea that God had already chosen him for a remarkable purpose. At that time, Israel was ruled by King Saul, the nation's first king. Though Saul had once followed God faithfully, pride and disobedience had begun to take root within his heart. Because of this, God rejected Saul as king and chose another to take his place. God sent the prophet Samuel to Bethlehem with an important mission. Go to the house of Jesse, God told him. I have chosen one of his sons to become king. When Samuel arrived, Jesse proudly presented his oldest sons before him. They were tall, handsome, and appeared worthy of becoming kings. Samuel looked at Eliab, David's oldest brother, and thought, surely this must be the one. But God spoke to Samuel and said, do not look at his appearance or his height. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, Jesse's sons passed before Samuel, but God chose none of them. Finally, Samuel asked, are these all your sons? There is still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he is out tending the sheep. David was quickly brought before Samuel. Though young and overlooked by others, God saw something extraordinary within him. Then God said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. Samuel poured oil upon David's head, and from that day forward, the Spirit of God rested powerfully upon him. David returned to his sheep afterward. He was anointed king, yet he would wait many years before wearing a crown. Sometimes God's promises require patience. Before David became king, God was preparing him through seasons of waiting. One day, while protecting his sheep, David faced a lion that carried away one of the lambs. Without hesitation, he pursued the fierce animal and rescued the helpless sheep from its jaws. On another occasion, he fought and killed a bear that threatened his flock. These victories were not merely acts of bravery, they were lessons in faith. The same God who protected David in the wilderness was preparing him for even greater battles ahead. Soon another challenge would arise, one that would change David's life forever. The nation of Israel stood trembling before its enemies. The mighty Philistine army had gathered for war, and among them stood a terrifying giant named Goliath.
For 40 days, Goliath challenged Israel's army. Choose one man to fight me, he shouted. If he defeats me, we will serve you. But if I defeat him, you will become our servants. The giant stood over 9 feet tall and wore heavy armor of bronze. His spear was enormous, and his voice filled the valley with fear. Even King Saul was afraid. Meanwhile, David remained at home tending sheep. One day, Jesse asked David to deliver food to his brothers who were serving in Saul's army. Upon arriving at the battlefield, David heard Goliath mocking both Israel and the God they served. Unlike everyone else, David was not overwhelmed by fear. Who is this Philistine, he asked, that he should defy the armies of the living God? David volunteered to fight the giant. King Saul protested, you are only a boy, and he has been a warrior all
You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior all his life. The Lord will deliver me. He will deliver me from this Philistine.
Rejecting Saul's heavy armor, David carried only his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones gathered from a nearby stream. As Goliath laughed at the young shepherd approaching him, David boldly declared, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." With a single stone launched from his sling, David struck Goliath upon the forehead.
The shepherd boy had become Israel's greatest hero.
Israel's greatest hero. But victory would bring new challenges. King Saul became jealous of David's growing popularity. When the people sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands," Saul's heart was filled with envy. Several times, Saul attempted to kill David. Forced to flee for his life, David spent years hiding in caves and wandering through the wilderness. Though he had opportunities to kill Saul and claim the throne for himself, David refused. He trusted God's timing rather than taking matters into his own hands. During these difficult years, David formed a deep friendship with Saul's son Jonathan. Though Jonathan knew David would one day become king, he remained loyal and loved him as a brother. Their friendship remains one of the most beautiful examples of loyalty and sacrifice found in Scripture. Eventually, King Saul died in battle, and after years of waiting, David was crowned.
After years of waiting, David was crowned king over Judah and later over all Israel. The shepherd
leadership, Israel prospered greatly. Jerusalem became the nation's capital, and David brought the Ark of the Covenant into the city with great rejoicing and worship. David desired to build a magnificent temple for God, but God had another plan. Instead, God made an everlasting covenant with David, promising that one of his descendants would establish an eternal kingdom, a promise ultimately fulfilled through Jesus Christ. Though David was a man after God's own heart, he was not a perfect man. One evening, David saw a woman named Bathsheba bathing and desired her. Though she was married, David abused his authority and committed a great sin. When he learned that she was expecting a child, he attempted to hide his wrongdoing and arranged for her husband, Uriah, to be placed in the fiercest part of battle where he lost his life. David had fallen deeply. God sent the prophet Nathan to confront him. Nathan told David a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. Filled with anger, David declared that such a man deserved punishment. Then Nathan spoke the words David never expected to hear. "You are the man." Immediately, David realized the seriousness of his sin. Unlike Saul, who often defended his failures, David humbled himself before God and sincerely repented. He prayed, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." Though David was forgiven, his choices brought painful consequences upon his family and kingdom. Later, David faced one of the greatest heartbreaks of his life when his beloved son Absalom rebelled against him and attempted to seize the throne. David was forced once again to flee Jerusalem. Though victorious in the conflict that followed,
David mourned deeply when Absalom died.
"Oh, my son Absalom!
I had died instead of you." These moments remind us that even great leaders experience sorrow, disappointment, and loss. Yet throughout every season of David's life, whether shepherd, warrior, fugitive, or king, God remained faithful. As David grew old, he prepared his son Solomon to become Israel's next king. Though David would never build the temple himself, he joyfully gathered the materials that Solomon would one day use to accomplish the task. Near the end of his life, David reflected upon God's faithfulness. God had been with him in the lonely fields of Bethlehem. God had been with him before Goliath. God had protected him in caves and wilderness places. God had forgiven him when he failed, and God had fulfilled every promise made to him. After faithfully serving God and leading Israel for 40 years, David died peacefully and was buried among Israel's kings.